Join us for a heartwarming tale of healing and second chances at Serene Stone Ranch, where Clara Martinez seeks refuge from her painful past. When she meets the ranch owner, Davy Reynolds, two wounded souls begin a journey toward healing together. This beautiful story of love, trust, and redemption reminds us that sometimes our broken pieces fit perfectly with someone else's. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from. The morning sun was barely visible as Clara Martinez drove her old blue pickup truck down the dusty road leading to Serene Stone Ranch. The truck, like Clara herself, had seen better days. At 26, Clara felt much older, worn down by a life filled with people who had walked away. She parked near the main house, a large wooden structure with a wraparound porch that seemed to welcome visitors despite its weathered appearance. Clara checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her face showed the fatigue of the 6-hour drive from the city. She didn't bother with makeup anymore. What was the point? This is it, she whispered to herself, gathering what little courage she had left. Just a job, just a fresh start. As she stepped out of the truck, the smell of grass, earth, and animals filled her nostrils. It was so different from the city, where every breath reminded her of failure. The apartment she'd shared with Rick, the job she'd lost when the divorce, made it impossible to focus. The pitying looks from friends who had warned her all along. "You must be Clara," a woman's voice called from the porch. Clara turned to see an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple dress and an apron, and her smile seemed genuine. "Yes, ma'am. Clara Martinez. I'm here about the stable." "Job?" "I'm Martha, the housekeeper. We've been expecting you. Come on in. I'll show you where you'll be staying before you meet the boss." Clara followed Martha to a modest building behind the main house. It was a long structure with several doors, the staff quarters. "This will be your room," Martha said, opening the third door. "It's simple but clean. 3 meals are served in the main house kitchen. Breakfast at 6, lunch at noon, dinner at 7. You'll start work at 6:30 cleaning the stables. And don't worry about the horses yet. We have stable hands who handle them." Clara nodded, taking in the small room. A single bed with clean sheets, a wooden dresser, a small bathroom with a shower. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd hoped for. "Thank you," Clara said, placing her duffel bag on the bed. "When do I meet Mr. Reynolds?" Martha's expression changed slightly, a shadow crossing her face. "Davy, Mr. Reynolds tends to keep to himself. You might not see him for days. He doesn't visit the stables much anymore." Clara wanted to ask why, but something in Martha's tone suggested it wasn't her place to question. Instead, she asked, "When should I start?" "Rest today. Start tomorrow. Morning. The main stable is the big red building down the path. Can't miss it." After Martha left, Clara unpacked her few belongings. The divorce had left her with almost nothing. Rick had made sure of that. "You're not enough, Clara," he had said the night he left. "Never were, never will be." 4 years of marriage ended with those words that still echoed in her mind. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. This was what she needed. Distance from memories, simple work, and a routine that wouldn't require her heart to be involved. The next morning, Clara woke before her alarm. The country silence had been almost too quiet compared to the city noise she was used to. She dressed in worn jeans, a simple t-shirt, and her old boots, then tied her hair back without looking in the mirror. After a quick breakfast in the kitchen, where she met a few other workers who barely acknowledged her, Clara made her way to the stables. The morning air was crisp, and somewhere in the distance a rooster announced the day. The main stable was larger than she'd expected. When she pushed open the heavy wooden door, she was hit by the smell: hay, horses, and something else: neglect. It was clear that while the horses were cared for, the building itself hadn't received proper attention in some time. Clara found cleaning supplies in a small room off to the side. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work, starting with the empty stalls. The physical labor felt good, the strain in her muscles a welcome distraction from the strain in her heart. As she worked, she began to hum softly, an old habit her mother had always criticized. "Nobody wants to hear that, Clara," she'd say, and eventually Clara had learned to keep her songs quiet just for herself. But here, with only horses as audience, she let her voice grow a little stronger. She was on her hands and knees, scrubbing, a particularly stubborn stain on the floor of a stall when she felt it, the sensation of being watched. Clara turned quickly, still on her knees, to find a man standing in the doorway of the stable. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead. His face was handsome but serious, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, but something about his stance told Clara exactly who he was. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, scrambling to her feet and brushing hay from her jeans. "I'm Clara Martinez, the new stable cleaner." He didn't smile, but his eyes traveled over her face in a way that made her feel exposed. "You're doing more than was asked," he said, his voice deep and quiet. "The contract was just for basic cleaning." Clara looked around at the work she'd already done, scrubbing years of dirt from corners, organizing tools that had been thrown haphazardly around. "I like things clean," she said simply. "It's no extra trouble." Something flickered in his expression, too quick for her to read. He walked further into the stable, his gaze now on the horses. One big black stallion in the corner stall snorted and moved restlessly as Davy approached. "That's Thunder," he said, stopping a safe distance from the stall. "Nobody rides him anymore. Too unpredictable." Clara looked at the horse, seeing the nervous energy in his movements. "He seems scared," she said without thinking. Davy's head turned sharply toward her. "What would you know about it?" The question wasn't aggressive, just surprised, but Clara felt herself shrink anyway. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "No," he interrupted, his tone softer. "I'm asking, what makes you say he's scared?" Clara hesitated, then gestured toward the horse. "The way he's moving. Not angry, just anxious. Like he's waiting for something bad to happen." Davy stared at her for a long moment, then looked back at Thunder. "Maybe he is," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then, louder, "Keep your distance from him. He's not safe." He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Clara where she stood dirty and disheveled from her work. His eyes traveled from her messy hair to her worn boots, then back to her face. "There are people who clean floors," he said, his voice almost gentle, "and there are people who clean souls. You seem to do both." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Clara standing in the middle of the stable, wondering if she had imagined the entire exchange. The days fell into a rhythm. Clara would wake early, eat quickly, and spend her mornings making the stables cleaner than they had been in years. The other workers noticed but said little, except for Tom, an older stable hand who had worked at Serene Stone Ranch for decades. "Never seen these stables so clean," he commented one afternoon, leaning on a pitchfork. "Not since young Mr. Reynolds died." Clara, who had been organizing brushes, looked up. "Young Mr. Reynolds?" Tom's weathered face grew solemn. "Boss's younger brother, Alex. Died 3 years ago in a rodeo accident. Terrible thing. Davy hasn't been the same since, doesn't ride anymore, barely comes to the stables." Clara thought about Davy's face when he'd looked at Thunder. Was that his brother's horse, the black stallion? Tom nodded slowly. "Alex was riding Thunder when it happened. Horse spooked during a competition. Alex was thrown, hit his head just wrong." He tapped his temple. "Davy blames himself. He was the one who insisted Alex enter that competition." Clara felt a heaviness in her chest. No wonder the stables felt neglected. They were a monument to grief. That evening, after dinner, Clara found herself drawn back to the stables. The place was quiet, with only the occasional sound of horses shifting in their stalls. She approached Thunder's stall cautiously. The big horse eyed her warily, keeping his distance at the back of the stall. "Hello there," Clara said softly. She didn't try to reach for him, just stood there talking in a gentle voice. "You've had it rough, haven't you? Everyone afraid of you. Everyone remembering only the worst day." Thunder's ears twitched forward slightly, listening. "I know how that feels," she continued, "when people only see your mistakes. When one bad moment defines everything about you." She started to hum softly, the same tune she'd been humming while cleaning. To her surprise, Thunder took a step forward, then another, until he was at the front of the stall. Still humming, Clara slowly raised her hand, palm up, not reaching into the stall but offering it near the opening. After what seemed like an eternity, Thunder stretched his neck and sniffed her hand. Then gently he pressed his nose against her palm. "Well," a voice said from behind her, "I've never seen him do that." Clara turned to find Davy standing in the stable doorway, watching her interaction with Thunder. She quickly pulled her hand away. "I'm sorry, I know you said to keep my distance." Instead of anger, Davy's face showed something like wonder. He walked slowly toward them, stopping a few feet away. "No, it's good. He hasn't let anyone touch him since—" He didn't finish the sentence. Thunder retreated to the back of the stall again as Davy approached. "He's still afraid," Clara said softly. Davy nodded, his eyes on the horse. "We both are." The words hung in the air between them, more honest than Clara had expected. She looked at Davy's face in the dim light and saw grief etched into every line. "Your brother?" she said hesitantly. "Tom told me about what happened." Davy's jaw tightened, but he didn't seem angry. "Tom talks too much," he said, but there was no heat in his words. "But yes, Alex, he was everything good about this place, everything good about me." Clara watched as he took a step closer to Thunder's stall, then stopped, as if unable to move further. "I was supposed to ride that day," he said quietly, "but I had business in town, so I told Alex to take my place in the competition, told him it was his chance to shine." The stable was quiet, except for the soft sounds of horses breathing. Clara didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, letting him speak. "I've never told anyone that," Davy said, looking surprised at his own confession. He turned to Clara, really looking at her. "Why am I telling you?" Clara shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable under his intense gaze. "Sometimes it's easier to talk to strangers. No history." "Is that why you're here, running from history?" The question hit too close to home. Clara looked away. "I should finish up here." Davy seemed to realize he'd overstepped. "Of course, I didn't mean to keep you." He turned to leave, then paused. "Thank you for being kind to him." He nodded toward Thunder. Clara wasn't sure if he meant the horse or himself. The weeks passed, and slowly Clara began to feel at home at Serene Stone Ranch. The stables were transformed under her care, and she found herself spending more time with the horses, especially Thunder. The big horse had grown to trust her, allowing her to brush him and even lead him around the stable yard. What Clara didn't expect was how often she would see Davy. Though he never entered the stables fully, he would appear at the doorway, watching her work, sometimes asking simple questions about her day. Their conversations were brief, but began to feel like a comfortable part of her routine. One evening, as she was finishing up for the day, Davy appeared with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her one. "It's getting colder." Clara accepted the cup with a surprised smile. "Thank you." They stood side by side, looking out at the ranch as the sun began to set. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. "My brother," Davy said suddenly, "he would have liked you." Clara looked at him, surprised by the comment. "He always said, 'You could tell everything about a person by how they treated animals,'" Davy continued. "He'd have approved of how you are with Thunder." "I wish I could have met him," Clara said honestly. Davy's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw the beginning of a smile. "Me too." The moment was interrupted by the sound of an approaching truck. Davy's expression changed instantly, closing off. A sleek black pickup pulled up near the stables, and a man stepped out, tall, well-dressed in a way that seemed out of place on a ranch, with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Davy?" the man called, walking toward them. "There you are, been looking all over." Davy's posture had stiffened. "Mark, didn't know you were coming by." Mark's eyes landed on Clara, taking in her work clothes and messy hair with a look that made her want to disappear. "And who's this?" "Clara Martinez," Davy said formally. "Our new stable manager." The title surprised Clara. She'd been hired as a cleaner, not a manager, but she didn't correct him. Mark extended a hand, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Mark Peterson, old friend of the family. Used to work here before I moved on to better things." The way he said it made it clear he thought the ranch was beneath him now. Clara shook his hand briefly, disliking him immediately. "I need to talk business, Davy," Mark said, turning away from Clara as if dismissing her. Got some investors interested in that north piece of land. The offer's better than last time. Clara took the hint. I should finish up here, she said, moving to leave. No need, Davy said quickly. You're done for the day. Mark and I can talk in the house. As they walked away, Clara couldn't help but notice how different Davy seemed with Mark. Guarded, tense, nothing like the man who had brought her coffee and talked about his brother. Later that night, unable to sleep, Clara returned to the stables. The peace she found there had become a comfort on restless nights. She was surprised to find Davy already there, standing outside Thunder's stall. He turned when he heard her approach. Couldn't sleep either. Clara shook her head. Too quiet here sometimes. I'm still getting used to it. Davy nodded, understanding. For me, it's too loud. Too many memories in this place. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Clara asked, Your friend seems interesting. Davy's expression darkened. Mark's not a friend. Not anymore. He used to work here, like he said. Left right after Alex died. Now he comes back trying to convince me to sell pieces of the ranch to developers. Will you? Sell, I mean. Davy looked around the stable, his eyes lingering on Thunder. This ranch was everything to Alex. And to me once. He sighed. But sometimes I wonder if holding on is just another way of not moving forward. Clara understood that feeling all too well. Sometimes, she said carefully, holding on is how we honor what mattered. Davy looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. My brother used to say that people who care for animals care for people too. You've been doing that for me. The words hung in the air between them, more intimate than anything they'd shared before. Clara felt her heart beating faster, and it scared her. She'd come here to escape, to build walls, not to feel this pull toward another person who could hurt her. I should go, she said quickly. Early morning tomorrow. As she turned to leave, Davy called after her. Clara. She paused. Looking back, thank you, he said simply, for bringing life back to this place. Clara nodded once, then hurried away, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. She had come to Serene Stone Ranch looking for silence and routine, not connection, especially not with a man still haunted by his past. But as she lay in bed that night, Clara couldn't help but think about the way Davy had looked at her, the way he had trusted her with his pain. For the first time since arriving, she wondered if she had found more than just a job at Serene Stone Ranch. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where her heart could begin to heal. The following weeks brought a change to Serene Stone Ranch. It wasn't just the stables that looked different, cleaner, more organized, filled with light, but the whole atmosphere of the place had shifted. The workers noticed it. Martha noticed it. Even the horses seemed to sense it. Clara had been there for nearly 2 months now, and her simple presence had breathed life back into corners of the ranch that had been shrouded in grief for too long. Every morning, she would rise with the sun, take her coffee on the small porch outside her quarters, and watch as the ranch came to life. By 6:30, she was in the stables, not just cleaning now, but caring for the horses, especially Thunder, who had grown surprisingly attached to her. Never thought I'd see the day, Tom commented one morning as he watched Clara lead Thunder around the paddock. That horse hasn't let anyone handle him since Alex died. Clara smiled, patting Thunder's neck. He just needed someone to listen to him. Seems like he's not the only one around here who needed that, Tom said with a knowing look, nodding toward the main house where Davy stood on the porch, watching them. Clara felt her cheeks warm. She had tried to maintain a professional distance from Davy, especially after their conversation in the stables that night, but somehow he kept finding reasons to be where she was, bringing her coffee, asking her opinion on ranch matters, even joining her occasionally as she worked with Thunder. Their conversations had grown longer, more personal. Clara learned about Davy's childhood on the ranch, how he and his brother had been inseparable despite their different personalities. Davy serious and responsible, Alex wild and free-spirited. In turn, she found herself sharing small pieces of her own past. Her father, who left when she was 8, her mother, who worked 2 jobs and had little time for her only child, her early marriage to Rick, who had seemed like safety until he became another person who found her lacking. "You're nothing like how you see yourself," Davy had told her one evening as they sat on the fence watching the sunset. "You see all these broken pieces. I see someone whole." The comment had stayed with her, warming her from inside even as she tried to remind herself not to read too much into his kindness. On a crisp fall morning, Clara was mucking out stalls when she heard the sound of a truck approaching. Her stomach tightened when she recognized Mark Peterson's black pickup. Since his first visit, he had returned to the ranch several times, always with the same agenda, trying to convince Davy to sell land to developers. Each time, he would look at Clara with thinly veiled contempt, as if her very presence irritated him. Clara continued her work, hoping to avoid an encounter, but minutes later, Mark appeared at the stable door. "Still playing stable girl, I see," he said, leaning against the door frame. Clara kept her eyes on her task. "Can I help you with something, Mr. Peterson?" He stepped inside, looking around the stable with a critical eye. "Just waiting for Davy. Thought I'd see what all the fuss is about. He talks about you quite a bit." This caught Clara's attention, but she tried not to show it. "I'm just doing my job." Mark moved closer, his expensive boots somehow remaining spotless on the stable floor. "That's what they all say at first." "Excuse me?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You think you're the first pretty girl to catch Davy's eye since Alex died? There was Lisa from the diner. Then that veterinarian, what was her name? Sarah. All of them thinking they'd landed themselves a rich rancher." Clara felt heat rise to her face. "I'm not interested in Mr. Reynolds' money." "Of course not," Mark said with mock sincerity. "You just happened to show up out of nowhere, with nothing and no one, and take a job cleaning stables for minimum wage." He leaned in closer. "I've seen your type before. Looking for security, for a man to solve all your problems. But let me save you some time. Davy Reynolds isn't going to be that man." Before Clara could respond, another voice cut through the stable. "That's enough, Mark." They both turned to find Davy standing in the doorway, his expression hard. Mark straightened, his demeanor instantly changing. "Davy, just getting to know your new stable manager better. Fascinating woman. In my office. Now." Davy's voice was cold in a way Clara had never heard before. Mark shrugged and walked out, but not before giving Clara one last pointed look. Davy lingered for a moment. "Whatever he said to you, it doesn't matter," Clara interrupted, turning back to her work. "You should go, he's waiting." Davy hesitated, then nodded and left. Clara continued cleaning, but her movements were mechanical now, her mind replaying Mark's words. She had been foolish to think that someone like Davy could see her as anything more than an employee. Mark was right. She was just another woman passing through his life. Later that afternoon, Clara was brushing thunder in the paddock when she spotted Mark's truck leaving. She expected Davy to appear at the stables afterward, as he often did, but he didn't come. Dinner came and went with no sign of him. It wasn't unusual for Davy to eat in his office, Martha explained, but Clara couldn't help feeling that he was avoiding her. After dinner, she returned to the stables for her evening check on the horses. The night was clear and cool, with stars spreading across the sky like scattered diamonds. Clara had just finished giving Thunder a final pat when she heard footsteps behind her. "He likes you more than he ever liked me," Davy said quietly. Clara turned to find him standing just inside the stable door, hands in his pockets. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced than usual. "That's not true," she said. "He's just gotten used to me." Davy moved closer, stopping a few feet away. "I want to apologize for Mark. He had no right to speak to you that way." So Davy had heard what Mark said. Clara felt embarrassment wash over her. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," Davy insisted, his voice firm. "Mark doesn't speak for me or this ranch. He never has." Clara met his eyes briefly, then looked away. He seemed pretty sure about what he was saying. Davy sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mark and I grew up together. His family owned the neighboring ranch until they lost it when we were teenagers. His father came to work for mine, and Mark never forgave the humiliation. When Alex died, Mark saw an opportunity. He'd made connections with developers by then, and he thought I'd be vulnerable enough to sell. And were you? Clara asked softly. I considered it, Davy admitted. For a while I couldn't bear to be here. Every corner of this place reminded me of Alex and what I'd lost. His eyes found hers in the dim light of the stable. Until you came. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Clara wasn't ready to accept. She turned back to Thunder's stall. I should finish up here. Clara. Davy's voice stopped her. What Mark said about the other women, it wasn't true. There's been no one since Alex died. I wasn't ready to let anyone close. Clara looked back at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. All she found was raw honesty. And now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Davy took a step toward her. Now I find myself thinking about things I haven't thought about in years, possibilities, a future that isn't just about surviving each day. The air between them seemed to thicken. Clara felt her heart beat faster, the same fear and hope battling inside her that had been growing for weeks. I should go, she said quickly, moving past him toward the door. Clara, he called after her. She paused but didn't turn around. My brother used to say that people who care for animals care for people too. You've been doing that for me since you arrived, whether you meant to or not. The words were so similar to what he had said before, but this time there was something, more in his voice, a certainty, a decision made. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions she had tried so hard to keep buried. Good night, Mr. Reynolds, she said softly, and hurried back to her quarters before he could see her cry. The next morning, Clara woke with the sun as usual, but her heart felt heavy. The conversation with Mark, followed by Davy's words in the stable, had left her confused and afraid. She had come to Serene Stone Ranch to escape, to build a simple life where she couldn't be hurt again. But somehow, without intending to, she had begun to care. She went through her morning routine mechanically, avoiding the main house and taking her coffee back to her room instead of sitting on the porch as usual. When she finally made her way to the stables, she was surprised to find Davy there, dressed in work clothes she had never seen him wear before. Good morning, he said, as if it was perfectly normal for him to be in the stables at this hour. Good morning, Clara replied cautiously. Is everything all right? Davy nodded, gesturing to a pile of tools. I thought I might help you today. These stables were my responsibility long before they were yours. Clara blinked in surprise. In all the time she had been at the ranch, she had never seen Davy do physical work around the place, though Tom had told her that before Alex's death, the brothers had worked side by side in every aspect of ranch life. You don't have to do that, she said. I can manage. I know you can, Davy said simply, but I'd like to help if you'll let me. There was something in his expression, a quiet determination, a plea, that made it impossible for Clara to refuse. She nodded and they fell into work together, starting with the empty stalls at the far end of the stable. At first, they worked in silence, but gradually, as the morning progressed, they began to talk. Light conversations at first, about the weather, the horses, the changes Clara had made to the stable organization. But then, as they moved to clean the tack room together, Davy spoke of Alex again. This was his favorite place, he said, running a hand over the saddles lined up on the wall. He'd spend hours in here, polishing leather, telling stories to anyone who would listen. He had a story for every piece of equipment, every horse. Clara watched as Davy picked up an old, well-worn saddle. This was his first, he continued. Our father gave it to him on his 10th birthday. Alex rode that same day until the sun went down. I had to drag him inside for dinner. There was pain in Davy's voice, but something else too, a warmth, a fondness that hadn't been there before when he spoke of his brother. He sounds like he was full of life, Clara said softly. Davy nodded, his fingers tracing the patterns on the saddle. He was. So much that sometimes it seemed like he was living for both of us. I was always the serious one, the responsible one. Alex was freedom, pure joy. He set the saddle back in its place, then turned to Clara. After he died, I locked up that part of myself, the part that knew how to feel joy. It seemed wrong to feel anything good when he was gone. Clara understood that better than she wanted to admit. After my divorce, she said hesitantly, I felt the same way, like I didn't deserve happiness. Like I had failed at the one thing I thought I could do right, loving someone. It was the most she had shared with anyone since arriving at the ranch. Davy's eyes held hers, full of understanding. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" he said with a sad smile. "Both afraid to live because of what we've lost." Clara looked down, unable to hold his gaze. "I came here to be invisible," she admitted, "to find a place where no one would expect anything from me except work, where I couldn't disappoint anyone." "And have you found that?" Davy asked quietly. Clara thought about the past months, the way the ranch had begun to feel like home, the way the horses responded to her care, the way Davy looked at her as if she was worth seeing. "No," she said honestly, "I found something else." Before Davy could respond, they heard the sound of a truck approaching. Clara felt her stomach tighten, expecting to see Mark's black pickup again, but instead, a battered blue truck pulled up near the stables, and a young woman jumped out, tall, blonde, dressed in expensive riding clothes that looked out of place on the working ranch. "Davy," she called, hurrying toward the stable. "I came as soon as I heard." Davy stiffened beside Clara, his expression closing off. "Melanie," he said, his voice flat. "What are you doing here?" The woman, Melanie, stopped just inside the stable door, her eyes moving from Davy to Clara and back again. "Mark called me. He said you were considering selling the North pasture. I had to come talk some sense into you." Clara felt like an intruder in a conversation she didn't belong in. "I should check on Thunder," she said quietly, moving to leave. "No," Davy said firmly, his hand catching her arm gently. "Stay." He turned back to Melanie. "Whatever Mark told you, I'm not selling any part of this ranch. Not now, not ever." Melanie's perfectly made-up face showed surprise, then suspicion. Her eyes landed on Davy's hand, still resting on Clara's arm. "I see," she said coldly. "Mark mentioned there was someone new. I didn't believe him." Davy's jaw tightened. "Melanie, this is Clara Martinez, our stable manager. Clara, this is Melanie Taylor, Alex's ex-fiancée." The introduction hit Clara like a physical blow. Alex's fiancée, the woman who should have been part of the Reynolds family, who might have been if Alex hadn't died. "Ex-fiancée," Melanie corrected, her eyes still on Clara. "Though if things had been different—" "But they're not," Davy interrupted. "Alex is gone. And you and I both know that even if he wasn't, you two wouldn't have lasted. He saw through you at the end." Melanie's face hardened. "And yet here you are, letting another woman get close, one who has even less to offer than I did." Her gaze swept over Clara's work clothes dismissively. "At least I brought connections, family name. What does she bring except a willingness to get her hands dirty?" Clara felt each word like a slap. It was too similar to what Rick had said when he left, that she didn't bring enough to the table, that she was somehow less than what a man like him deserved. "That's enough," Davy said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You need to leave Melanie now." Melanie looked between them once more, then smiled coldly. "This isn't over, Davy. Mark and I have plans for this place. Plans that won't change just because you've found yourself a stable girl to warm your bed." She turned and walked out, leaving a heavy silence behind her. "I'm sorry about that," Davy said finally, turning to Clara. "Melanie has always been difficult." Clara nodded stiffly, pulling away from his touch. "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. Melanie's words had cut deep, reopening wounds Clara thought had begun to heal. "I should get back to work, Clara," Davy said, his voice gentle. "Don't let what she said get to you. Melanie doesn't know you. But she knows your world," Clara said quietly. "And she's right. I don't belong in it. I'm just the stable cleaner, Davy." "Is that really all you think you are to me?" he asked. Something like hurt in his voice. Clara couldn't answer. She didn't know what she was to him, only that she was terrified of finding out, of risking her heart again, only to discover she wasn't enough. "I need some time," she said finally. "Please, Davy." Looked like he wanted to say more, but he nodded and stepped back, giving her the space she asked for. "Take all the time you need," he said softly. "I'll be here when you're ready." As he walked away, Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She had come to Serene Stone Ranch looking for peace, for a simple life without complications. Instead, she had found Davy, a man still haunted by his past, surrounded by people who seemed determined to control his future, and somehow, without meaning to, she had become part of that complicated equation. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying the day's events, working alongside Davy in comfortable silence, their conversation in the tack room, Melanie's arrival and her cutting words. It was all too much, too fast. After tossing and turning for hours, Clara gave up on sleep. She pulled on her boots and a warm jacket and headed for the stables. The night was clear and cold, the moon casting silver light over the ranch. The stables were quiet, the horses mostly sleeping. Clara moved to Thunder's stall, finding comfort in the big horse's gentle greeting. She stroked his nose, talking softly, to him as she often did when her thoughts were too heavy. "I don't know what I'm doing here anymore," she confessed to the horse. "I came to get away from all this. Feelings, complications, people seeing more in me than is really there. But now it's not so simple," a voice finished from behind her. Clara turned quickly to find Mark Peterson standing in the stable doorway watching her. She hadn't heard him approach, and his sudden appearance in the middle of the night sent a chill down her spine. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mark stepped into the stable, moving slowly toward her. "I could ask you the same thing. Midnight visit to the stables, what would Davy think?" "I'm just checking on the horses," Clara said. "I do it every night." Mark smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Dedicated. I'll give you that." He stopped, a few feet away from her. "I saw Melanie today. She was quite upset after her visit here." Clara said nothing, watching him warily. "It got me thinking," Mark continued, walking along the row of stalls, "about loyalty, about what this place means to different people." He turned to face her directly. "What does Serene Stone Ranch mean to you, Clara?" "It's my job," she said, simply. "My home for now." "For now," Mark repeated. "That's honest, at least. Most women who set their sights on Davy start planning forever right away." Clara felt her temper rise. "I haven't set my sights on anyone. I was hired to clean stables, and that's what I'm doing." Mark leaned against a post, studying her. "You know I believe you, which makes this all the more interesting. Davy Reynolds, the man who shut everyone out after his brother died, is falling for a woman who doesn't even want him." His words made Clara's heart beat faster. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" Mark pushed off from the post, moving closer. "I've known Davy our whole lives. I recognize the signs. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Clara backed up a step. "I don't have to do anything, and I don't have to discuss this with you." "Actually," Mark said, his voice hardening, "you do. Because whether you meant to or not, you've become a problem for me. Davy was this close to selling the North pasture before you showed up. Now he's talking about expanding the horse program, investing in the ranch again." He shook his head. All because some stable girl made him feel something. There was an edge to his voice that made Clara glance toward the door, calculating the distance. Mark noticed and smiled. "I'm not going to hurt you, Clara. I'm a businessman, not a thug. I'm simply going to make you an offer." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. $20,000, cash, enough for a fresh start somewhere else. All you have to do is leave. Tonight, no goodbyes, no explanations." Clara stared at the envelope, stunned. "You're trying to pay me to leave." "I'm offering you an opportunity," Mark corrected. "We both know you didn't come here looking for complications. This gives you a clean exit, plus enough money to start over properly. All you have to do is walk away." Clara felt anger rise in her chest. "You don't know the first thing about me or why I'm here." "I know that you're running from something," Mark said coolly. "People who take jobs cleaning stables in the middle of nowhere usually are. I'm giving you the chance to keep running with a financial cushion this time." Clara looked at the envelope, then back at Mark's face. In that moment, she saw what Davy had been up against all these years. Not just grief over his brother, but people like Mark and Melanie who saw the ranch as nothing more than an opportunity, who had been waiting for him to break so they could sweep in and take what they wanted. "Keep your money," she said firmly. I'm not going anywhere. Mark's expression hardened. Don't be stupid, Clara. You don't belong here. You said it yourself. This is just a job to you, a temporary home. Why fight for something that isn't yours? The question hit Clara harder than she expected. Why was she fighting? The smart thing would be to take the money and go, to continue the pattern of her life, moving on before she could be hurt again. But something had changed in her. Since coming to Serene Stone Ranch, something had begun to heal, to grow roots she hadn't planned on. You're right that I came here running, she said quietly, and you're right that I didn't expect to stay, but you're wrong about one thing. I do belong here. More than you ever will. Mark's face twisted with anger. You'll regret this, he said, shoving the envelope back into his jacket. I was trying to be generous, to give you an easy out. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. Davy Reynolds has lost everything that ever mattered to him. Do you really think you'll be the exception? With those words hanging in the air, he left, the sound of his truck engine breaking the night's quiet moments later. Clara stood in the stable, her heart pounding. Thunder nickered softly from his stall, as if sensing her distress. She moved, to him automatically, finding comfort in the gentle giant's presence. What am I doing? She whispered, pressing her forehead against Thunder's neck. What am I getting myself into? But even as she asked the question, Clara knew the answer. Somehow, without planning it, without wanting it, she had found something at Serene Stone Ranch worth fighting for. Not just a job or a place to live, but a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. And more than that, she had found Davy. A man as wounded as she was, as afraid of trusting again. A man who looked at her and saw someone worth seeing. The realization both terrified and exhilarated her. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Clara allowed herself to admit the truth. She was falling in love with Davy Reynolds. And that changed everything. The morning after Mark's midnight visit to the stables, Clara woke with a new sense of purpose. His attempt to buy her off had clarified something for her. She wasn't just passing through Serene Stone Ranch anymore. This place, these people, had become important to her, important enough to fight for. She dressed quickly and headed to the main house earlier than usual. Martha was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the ranch hands. You're up early, Martha commented, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter to Clara. I need to talk to Davy, Clara said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Is he awake yet? Martha nodded toward the window. Been up for hours. He's out by the corral. Said something about working with the new colts today. She gave Clara a knowing look. He's been different lately. More like his old self. Clara felt her cheeks warm. I haven't done anything, honey, Martha said gently. Sometimes just being there is doing something. She patted Clara's hand. Go on. He's waiting, even if he doesn't know it yet. Clara found Davy exactly where Martha had said, leaning against the corral fence watching as Tom worked with a young colt. The morning sun highlighted the strong lines of his profile, and for a moment Clara just stood there, taking in the sight of him. When he turned and saw her, the smile that spread across his face made her heart skip. Good morning, he said, as she approached. You're up early. Clara nodded, coming to stand beside him at the fence. I need to talk to you, about Mark. Davy's expression immediately darkened. What about him? He came to see me last night in the stables. Davy straightened, his body tense. What did he want? Clara took a deep breath. He offered me money to leave, $20,000 to be exact. Said I was becoming a problem. For his plans. Anger flashed in Davy's eyes. I'll kill him. That's not why I'm telling you, Clara said quickly. I just thought you should know what kind of person you're dealing with. He's not your friend, Davy. I've known that for a long time, Davy said, his voice hard. But this crosses a line. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm sorry, Clara. You shouldn't have to deal with this. I can handle Mark Peterson, she assured him. I've dealt with worse. Davy's eyes softened as he looked at her. I believe you could handle just about anything, but you shouldn't have to. He hesitated, then asked, What did you tell him? I told him to keep his money, Clara said simply. I'm not going anywhere. The relief on Davy's face was unmistakable. Good. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers on the fence rail, not quite touching. I don't want you to go. The simple statement held more meaning than either of them was ready to address. Clara looked away, focusing on the colt Tom was working with. He's coming along well, she said, changing the subject. Davy allowed the shift. Tom's the best horse trainer in 3 counties, always has been. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Tom work. Then Davy turned to her, his expression serious again. There's something I want to show you, he said. If you have time this morning, Clara nodded. The stables can wait an hour. Good, Davy said with a small smile. I'll get my truck. They drove in silence for about 15 minutes, following a dirt road that wound away from the main ranch buildings and up into the rolling hills that formed the northern boundary of Serene Stone Ranch. Clara had never been to this part of the property before, and she found herself captivated by the beauty of it. Golden hills dotted with oak trees, a small stream cutting through the valley below. Davy finally stopped the truck at the crest of a hill overlooking the entire valley. The view was breathtaking. Miles of undeveloped land, pristine and peaceful in the morning light. This is it, he said as they got out of the truck. The north pasture. The land Mark's been trying to get me to sell. Clara turned slowly, taking in the panoramic view. It's beautiful, Davy nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. My great-grandfather bought this land when there was nothing here but wild grass and dreams. 4 generations of Reynolds have worked this ranch, added to it, made it what it is. He walked to the edge of the hill, Clara following beside him. Mark wants to sell this to developers who would build a resort here. Luxury homes, a golf course, the works. And you don't want that, Clara said. It wasn't a question. Davy sighed. For a while after Alex died, I didn't care. This place, and it was too full of ghosts, too empty without him. He looked at Clara, his eyes reflecting the clear blue of the morning sky. I almost sold it all, just to escape. What stopped you? Clara asked softly. At first, just inertia. It was easier to do nothing than to make a decision. He smiled slightly. Then you arrived. Clara felt her heart quicken. I don't understand. Neither did I at first, Davy admitted. But watching you with the horses, with Thunder especially, you brought life back to the stables, Clara. And somehow you brought it back to me too. He turned to face her fully. Mark saw it happening. That's why he tried to get rid of you. He knows that as long as you're here, I won't sell. Not this land, not any part of the ranch. Clara felt overwhelmed by his words, by the intensity in his eyes. Davy, I'm just a stable hand. I clean stalls and brush horses. No, he said, taking a step closer. You're the woman who wasn't afraid of a horse everyone else gave up on, who talks to animals like they understand every word, who works harder than anyone I've ever known. His voice softened. Who made me remember what it feels like to care about something. Someone. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, equal parts hope and fear battling within her. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Davy reached out, gently taking her hand in his. You don't have to say anything. Not yet. I just wanted you to see this place, to understand why it matters, why you matter. Clara looked down at their joined hands, then back up at the man who had somehow slipped past all her defenses. I told Mark I wasn't going anywhere, she said quietly. I meant it. The smile that spread across Davy's face was like sunrise breaking over the hills around them. Good, he said simply. That's good. They stood there for a long moment, hands linked, the vast landscape spread out before them like a promise. Then, reluctantly, Davy glanced at his watch. We should head back. I have a meeting with the bank this morning. As they drove back to the ranch, Clara felt something shifting inside her. Walls crumbling, hope growing in places that had been barren for too long. For the first time since arriving at Serene Stone Ranch, she allowed herself to imagine a future here, not just as an employee but as something more. The possibility both thrilled and terrified her. When they returned to the ranch, Clara headed to the stables while Davy went to prepare for his meeting. She threw herself into work, trying to process everything that had happened that morning. Davy's words on the hillside, the way he had looked at her, the feeling of his hand holding hers. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a voice startled her. "So he showed you the north pasture." Clara turned to find Melanie standing in the stable doorway, dressed impeccably in designer jeans and a silk blouse that seemed wildly impractical for a ranch. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. "What are you doing here?" Clara asked, straightening from where she'd been cleaning a water trough. Melanie stepped into the stable, looking around with distaste. "Memory lane, I suppose." This place was important to Alex. Her eyes settled on Clara. "And now Davy's using it to impress you, taking you up to the lookout, showing you the family kingdom." She smiled thinly. "Predictable." Clara set down her brush. "If you're looking for Davy, he's at the main house." "I'm not looking for Davy," Melanie said, moving closer. "I wanted to talk to you, woman to woman." Something in her tone put Clara on alert. "About what? About what you're getting yourself into?" Melanie stopped a few feet away. "Mark told me about your little midnight chat, about the offer you turned down." Clara's jaw tightened. "That was between Mark and me." "Nothing is just between two people in this world," Melanie said with a dismissive wave, "especially not when it involves the Reynolds fortune." "I'm not interested in Davy's money," Clara said firmly. Melanie laughed, the sound sharp and without humor. "Of course you are, everyone is. Maybe you've convinced yourself otherwise, but deep down you know the truth. A woman like you doesn't end up with a man like Davy Reynolds unless money is part of the equation." The words stung, echoing too closely. What Rick had said when he left her, that she wasn't the kind of woman men chose for keeps. Clara pushed away the painful memory. "You don't know anything about me," she said evenly. "I know enough," Melanie countered. "I know you showed up here with nothing but the clothes on your back. I know you took a job cleaning horse manure just to have a roof over your head. And I know that within months, you've managed to get Davy Reynolds, one of the wealthiest ranchers in the state, to look at you like you're his salvation." She stepped closer, her voice lowering. "But here's what you don't know, Clara. Davy isn't capable of love, not the real kind, not anymore. Alex was the heart of this family. When he died, that heart died too." Clara tried not to show how deeply Melanie's words cut. "If you believed that, you wouldn't be here trying to warn me off." Melanie's perfect smile faltered slightly. "I'm trying to save you from wasting your time. Davy may think he's ready to move on, to feel something again. But the moment things get real, the moment you need him to actually be there for you, he'll retreat. Just like he did after Alex died. Just like he's done with everyone who's tried to get close to him since." Clara thought about Davy's words. On the hillside, the vulnerability in his eyes, the way he had reached for her hand. That wasn't a man incapable of love. That was a man terrified of losing it again. "I appreciate your concern," Clara said, not bothering to hide the sarcasm in her voice. "But Davy and I can figure things out for ourselves." Melanie's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, a stubborn, foolish mistake." She pulled her designer purse higher on her shoulder. "Mark's offer won't stay open forever. $20,000 is life-changing money for someone like you." "Maybe," Clara agreed, "but some things are worth more than money." "How noble," Melanie said with a cold smile. "We'll see how long that lasts when reality sets in." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing you should know. Davy was supposed to be riding Thunder that day, not Alex. He sent his little brother in his place. How long do you think love lasts when it's built on that kind of guilt?" With those parting words, Melanie walked out, leaving Clara standing in the middle of the stable, her hands trembling slightly. The revelation wasn't new. Tom had told her the same story weeks ago, but hearing it from Melanie, weaponized and aimed to hurt, made it land differently. Clara thought about the weight Davy had been carrying all these years, the guilt that had kept him from the stables, from the horses he once loved, from living fully. Was Melanie right? Was what Clara was beginning to feel for Davy, what he seemed to be feeling for her, just another form of escape? Him from guilt, her from failure. Clara moved to Thunder's stall, finding comfort in the big horse's gentle presence. He nickered softly, pushing his nose against her open palm. "What should I do?" she whispered, stroking his dark mane. What if she's right? But deep down, Clara knew the truth. What was growing between her and Davy wasn't about escape or money, or guilt. It was about two broken people recognizing something in each other, the possibility of healing, of becoming whole again together. With sudden clarity, Clara realized what she needed to do. It was time to stop running, to stop letting fear dictate her choices. It was time to be brave. That evening, Clara waited nervously on the small porch outside her quarters. She had cleaned up after work, changing from her stable clothes into the one nice dress she owned, a simple blue sundress that Rick had always said was too plain. Her hair was down for once, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. When Davy's truck pulled up, she stood, her heart hammering in her chest. He stepped out, still dressed in the button-down shirt and dark jeans he'd worn for his bank meeting. When he saw her waiting, a smile spread across his face. "Clara," he said, walking toward her, "everything okay?" She nodded, finding her voice. "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight. Not in the main house with everyone. Else just us." Davy's smile widened. "I'd like that very much." Clara led him inside her small quarters, where she had set up a simple dinner on the tiny table. Nothing fancy, just 2 plates, some candles, and a meal she had prepared with Martha's help. "It's not much," she said apologetically. "I'm not much of a cook." "It's perfect," Davy said sincerely, pulling out her chair for her. They ate, talking about small things at first, the day's work, the new colts, Davy's meeting at the bank. But as they finished their meal, Clara gathered her courage. "Melanie came to see me today," she said quietly. Davy's expression darkened immediately. "What did she want?" "To warn me away from you," Clara said honestly. "She said some things. About you, about what happened with Alex." Davy set down his fork, his jaw tight. "Melanie doesn't know anything about me, not anymore." "She said you were supposed to be riding Thunder that day," Clara continued gently. "That you sent Alex instead." Pain flashed across Davy's face, raw and real. For a moment, Clara thought he might get up and leave. Instead, he took a deep breath. "It's true," he said, his voice low. "I had a meeting in town, something about property taxes. Nothing important, nothing that couldn't have waited." His hands clenched into fists on the table. "But I told Alex to take my place in the competition. Told him it was his chance to show everyone what he could do." Clara reached across the table, placing her hand over his clenched one. "It wasn't your fault, Davy, wasn't it?" he asked, his eyes meeting hers. "I knew Thunder was temperamental that day. I knew the crowd at that rodeo would be loud, overwhelming. But I sent Alex anyway, because it was easier. Because I was tired of competitions and wanted to focus on the business side of things." "You couldn't have known what would happen," Clara insisted. "Maybe not," Davy admitted, "but I've had 3 years to think about all the ways I could have prevented it. 3 years of avoiding that stable, avoiding Thunder, avoiding everything that reminded me of what I lost, what I caused." Clara squeezed his hand. "And yet, you kept Thunder. You didn't sell him or put him down, even though everyone probably told you to." Davy looked surprised at her observation. "I couldn't," he said after a moment. "He was Alex's favorite, and it wasn't his fault either." "That's how I know," Clara said softly. "Know what? That Melanie is wrong about you. She told me you're incapable of real love. But a man who can forgive a horse that most people would blame, that's a man with a tremendous capacity for love." Davy turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. "I thought I was," he said quietly. "Incapable, I mean. After Alex died, I shut down that part of myself. It hurt too much to care. To risk losing again." His eyes held hers, vulnerable and honest. "Then you showed up, with your quiet determination, your gentle way with the animals, your refusal to be scared off by a damaged man and his troubled horse." A smile touched his lips. "You woke something in me, Clara. Something I thought was gone for good." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. "I came here running away," she admitted. "From a failed marriage. From a man who told me I wasn't enough, would never be enough." "Rick was a fool," Davy said with unexpected fierceness. Clara blinked in surprise. "How did you know his name?" Martha, Davy admitted with a small smile. She overheard you having a nightmare once, saying his name. The admission should have embarrassed Clara, but instead it touched her. The idea that Davy had cared enough to ask about her, to remember the name of the man who had hurt her. He was right about one thing, Clara said. I didn't bring much to the table. No money, no connections, nothing that would help him climb the ladder he was so desperate to scale. And that's what Melanie and Mark don't understand, Davy said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. What you bring isn't something you can put a price on. It's not about money or status or connections. His voice softened. It's about how you make people feel. How you make me feel. Seen. Understood. Not alone. Clara felt something shift inside, her walls crumbling that had stood for too long. Davy, she whispered, not sure what else to say. I know it's too soon, he said quickly. I know we're both still healing, still figuring things out. But I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. Not guilt, not gratitude, not some misplaced need to save or be saved. Just real. The simple declaration, so honest and unadorned, broke the last of Clara's resistance. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded. I feel it too, she admitted, and it terrifies me. Davy stood, pulling her gently to her feet and around the small table until they stood face to face, hands still linked. We can be terrified together, he said with a soft smile. That's what brave people do, right? Feel the fear and move forward anyway. Clara laughed through her tears. Is that what we're doing? Being brave? I think so, Davy said, his free hand, coming up to gently brush a tear from her cheek. Braver than I've been in 3 years at least. Their eyes held, and in that moment Clara saw everything she needed to see. The pain, yes, but also the hope, the possibility, the future waiting to be written. Davy leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But Clara didn't want to pull away. Not anymore. She rose slightly on her toes, meeting him halfway as his lips found hers in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of them still afraid of breaking something fragile and new. But then, Davy's arms encircled, her waist pulling her closer, and Clara's hands found their way to his shoulders, his neck, the soft hair at the nape of his neck. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and fear melting away in the warmth of a connection neither had expected to find. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Davy rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since. I first saw you on your knees scrubbing that stable floor, singing to yourself when you thought no one could hear. Clara smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. That long? That long, he confirmed, though I tried very hard to deny it. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only when a sound from outside caught their attention. A truck engine coming up the drive. Davy straightened, his expression changing. That's Mark's truck. Clara felt her happiness falter. What's he doing here so late? Davy's jaw tightened. I don't know, but I intend to find out, and to make it very clear that he's not welcome here anymore. Not after what he tried to do to you. He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. Stay here, I'll handle this. But Clara shook her head, taking his hand firmly in hers. No, we'll handle it together. Davy looked down at their joined hands. Then, back at her face, a slow smile spreading across his features. Together, he agreed. I like the sound of that. Hand in hand, they walked out to confront whatever Mark Peterson had brought to their door. But whatever it was, Clara knew one thing for certain. She wasn't running anymore. She had found something, worth standing for, fighting for. She had found Davy, and he had found her. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, Clara squeezed Davy's hand. Whatever came next, they would face it the way they had started to face their pasts, their fears, their feelings for each other. Together. Mark's black truck screeched to a halt in front of the main house, dust billowing around it in the fading light. He jumped out, slamming the door behind him, his face flushed with anger. Melanie was right behind him in her sports car, parking next to his truck and emerging with equal fury. Davy? Mark shouted, striding toward them. What the hell do you think you're doing? Davy stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, Clara beside him, their hands still linked. "I could ask you the same thing, Mark. It's late, and you're not welcome. Here." Mark's eyes darted to their joined hands, his face darkening further. "So it's true, you've completely lost your mind." Melanie stepped up beside him, her cold gaze fixed on Clara. "I tried to warn you," she said. "Both of you." "What do you want, Mark?" Davy asked, his voice level but with an edge of steel. Clara had never heard before. Mark pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and thrust it at Davy. "Care to explain this? The bank called me this afternoon. Said you'd withdrawn your application to refinance the ranch. Said you were keeping the property after all." Davy didn't take the paper. "That's right. And I called Jack Peterson at the development company and told him the North Pasture isn't for sale. Not now, not ever." "You can't do that," Mark exploded. "We had a deal." "We had a conversation," Davy corrected calmly. 3 years ago, when I was barely functioning, I never signed anything, never committed to anything." "Because you were dragging your feet," Mark shouted. "But everyone knew it was happening. The investors, the developers, everyone. Everyone except me, apparently," Davy said. "Because I've changed my mind. Serene Stone Ranch stays whole, stays in the family." Melanie stepped forward, her voice cold. "This is because of her, isn't it?" She jerked her chin toward Clara. "You're throwing away millions because some stable girl batted her eyes at you." Clara felt Davy's hand tighten around hers, but before he could respond, she spoke. "I think you should leave now," she said quietly but firmly. "Both of you." Mark's face contorted with anger. "You don't get to tell me what to do, you little—" "Enough!" Davy's voice cut through the evening air like a whip. "Clara's right, you need to leave now and don't come back. You're making a mistake," Mark said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "A costly one." "No," Davy said with certainty. "For the first time in 3 years, I'm doing exactly what I should be doing, what Alex would have wanted me to do." He looked at Clara, his eyes softening. "What I want to do." "This isn't over," Mark warned, backing toward his truck. "You think you can just cut me out after everything I've done? After all the connections I've made for you?" "I think," Davy said evenly, "that whatever friendship we once had ended the moment you tried to pay Clara to leave. That crossed a line, Mark, one you can't come back from." Melanie's perfectly made-up face showed shock. She turned to Mark. "You did what?" Mark ignored her, his focus still on Davy. "You're going to regret this," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Both of you." "The only thing I regret," Davy said, "is letting you manipulate me for 3 years while I was too lost in grief to see what you were really after." Something dangerous flashed in Mark's eyes. "You always did think you were better than me. You and Alex both, the mighty Reynolds brothers, looking down on the ranch hand's son." He spat on the ground. "But I built something of my own. Something bigger than this dusty old ranch will ever be." "Then be happy with what you've built," Davy said simply, "and leave us alone." For a moment it seemed like Mark might lunge forward, might try to turn the confrontation physical. Clara tensed, but then Melanie grabbed his arm. "Let's go," she said sharply. "This is pointless." Mark shook her off, but backed toward his truck. "This isn't the end," he warned. "Not by a long shot." They watched as Mark and Melanie drove away, dust settling in their wake. Only when the taillights had disappeared down the long drive did Clara feel Davy relax beside her. "Are you okay?" she asked, looking up at him. Davy nodded, turning to face her. "Better than okay," he said with a small smile. "For the first time in years, I feel clear, like I've finally woken up from a long sleep." He cupped her face gently in his hands. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For being brave enough for both of us. For not running, even when Mark tried to make you go. For seeing something in me worth staying for." Clara leaned into his touch. "I see you," she said. Simply, "Just you." Davy's smile deepened, reaching his eyes in a way that transformed his face, erasing years of grief and guilt. "Then you see more than I've let anyone see in a very long time." He leaned down, kissing her softly under the starlit sky, both of them finally stepping fully into the light after too long in the shadows of their pasts. But as they stood there, wrapped in the promise of new beginnings, neither noticed the single headlight that appeared briefly at the end of the drive before disappearing again. Mark's truck, pulling off onto a side road rather than leaving Serene Stone Ranch property completely. In the distance, thunder rumbled across the hills, a storm gathering on the horizon. But for now, in this moment, Clara and Davy were safe in the shelter they had found in each other, two wounded souls beginning to heal together. The days following Mark and Melanie's dramatic exit were some of the happiest Clara had ever known. She and Davy fell into a new rhythm, working side by side during the day and spending evenings together talking, planning, dreaming. For the first time in her life, Clara felt truly seen and valued, not for what she could provide or become, but simply for who she was. The change in Davy was even more remarkable. The quiet, haunted man who had watched her from the stable doorway that first day had transformed. He smiled more, laughed often, and had begun to take an active role in the daily operations of the ranch again. Most significantly, he had started spending time in the stables, even helping Clara with Thunder. "He remembers you," Clara said one afternoon as they brushed the big horse together. "His body responds differently when you're near." Davy's hand paused on Thunder's flank. "Is that good or bad?" "Good," Clara assured him. "He's more relaxed, like he's been waiting for you to come back." Davy's eyes met hers over Thunder's back. "Maybe he's not the only one who's been waiting," he said softly. Clara smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. These moments of honesty between them still took her breath away. The way Davy could express his feelings so openly now, without fear or hesitation. That evening, they sat together on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Davy's arm was around her shoulders, and Clara leaned into him, content in a way she had never thought possible. "I've been thinking," Davy said, his voice rumbling against her ear where her head rested on his chest. "Dangerous," Clara teased. He laughed, the sound vibrating through her. "Maybe, but I've been thinking about the future, about what's next for Serene Stone Ranch." Clara looked up at him, curious. "What do you mean?" Davy's eyes were reflective as he gazed out at the land spreading before them. "For 3 years this place has been in limbo, not dying but not really living either. Just existing, like I was." Clara nodded, understanding all too well what he meant. She had been in that same limbo after her divorce, going through the motions of life without really living it. "But now," Davy continued, "I want more for this place. I want it to thrive again, to grow." "What are you thinking?" Clara asked, sitting up to see his face better. A smile spread across his features. "I want to expand the horse program, not just breeding and training for rodeos like we used to, but something new." His eyes found hers. "Something that helps people heal. The way Thunder has healed with you, the way I have." Clara felt her heart expand with pride and love. "Equine therapy?" Davy nodded. "I've been reading about it. Horses helping people with trauma, anxiety, grief." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "I've seen firsthand what a difference it can make." "It's a beautiful idea," Clara said sincerely. "The ranch would be perfect for that." "I think so too," Davy agreed. "And I was hoping that you might want to be part of it, to help build it. With me." The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond just a professional opportunity. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes as she realized what Davy was really asking. Not just for her help with a new business venture, but for a commitment, a future together. "I would love that," she said softly. "More than anything." Davy's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Good," he whispered against her skin, "because I can't imagine doing any of this without you." They sat in comfortable silence as the last rays of sun disappeared beyond the horizon, the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Clara had never felt so at peace, so certain that she was exactly where she was meant to be. But peace, as Clara had learned many times in her life, rarely lasted. The first sign that something was wrong came the next morning. Clara woke early, as usual, and headed to the stables before breakfast. As she approached, she noticed the main door was partially open, though she distinctly remembered closing and latching it the night before. Cautiously, she pushed the door wider, peering inside. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The horses were quiet in their stalls, the tools all in their proper places. But as she moved further in, checking each stall, an icy fear gripped her heart. Thunder was gone. Clara ran back outside, scanning the paddocks and pastures, hoping the horse had somehow gotten out and was grazing nearby. But there was no sign of the big black stallion anywhere. She hurried to the main house, finding Davy in the kitchen with Martha. "Thunder's missing," she said breathlessly. "The stable door was open this morning, and he's not in his stall or any of the pastures I can see from there." Davy was on his feet immediately, concern etched into his features. Could he have gotten loose somehow? Clara shook her head. His stall was still latched from the outside. Someone took him. The implication hung in the air. Only one person would have reason to take Thunder, someone who wanted to hurt Davy where it would wound most deeply. "Mark," Davy said, his voice tight with anger. "I'll call Sheriff Wilson." While Davy made the call, Clara paced the kitchen anxiously. Thunder wasn't just any horse, he was a living connection to Alex, a symbol of healing for both Davy and Clara. The thought of him in Mark's hands, being used as a pawn in some vindictive game, made her feel physically ill. Davy returned, his expression grim. "Sheriff's on his way. In the meantime, Tom's organizing the hands to start searching the property. Thunder can't have gone far if someone led him out on foot." "Unless they had a trailer," Clara said quietly. Davy's jaw tightened. "Let's not think about that yet." They spent the morning searching every corner of Serene Stone Ranch, but there was no sign of Thunder. Sheriff Wilson arrived mid-morning, taking statements and looking for evidence. "Looks like a professional job," he said after examining the stable. "No forced entry, nothing disturbed except the one stall. Your boy Mark knows how to cover his tracks." "Can't you arrest him?" Clara asked desperately. "We know it was him." "Uni." Sheriff shook his head. "Knowing and proving are two different things in the eyes of the law, miss. Without evidence, my hands are tied." As the day wore on with no sign of Thunder, Clara watched Davy retreat into himself, the joy and openness of recent days giving way to the old shadows. It broke her heart to see him slipping back into grief, but she understood all too well. Thunder wasn't just a horse to Davy, he was the last living link to Alex, a symbol of both guilt and redemption. That evening, as they sat in Davy's office, reviewing maps of the ranch and surrounding properties, Clara reached across the desk and took his hand. "We'll find him," she promised, "whatever it takes." Davy's eyes, tired and worried, met hers. What if we don't? The question held layers of fear, not just for Thunder, but for everything else they might lose if Mark succeeded in his revenge. Clara squeezed his hand tighter. "Then we'll get through that too, together." A small smile touched Davy's lips. "Together," he repeated, as if the word itself gave him strength. Their moment was interrupted by the ring of the telephone. Davy reached for it quickly, hope flaring in his eyes. "Reynolds here." Clara watched as his expression changed, hardening into something cold and dangerous. "Where is he?" Davy demanded into the receiver. "If you've hurt him, I swear." He fell, silent, listening. Then, "I'll be there alone, just like you said." He hung up, already rising from his chair. "That was Mark," he told Clara, reaching for his jacket. "He has Thunder at the old Peterson place. Says if I want him back, I need to come alone with the signed papers for the north pasture." Clara stood quickly. "You can't go alone. It's a trap." "I don't have a choice," Davy said, his voice flat. "He says if anyone else shows up, I'll never see Thunder again." "Then I'm coming with you," Clara insisted. "We'll stay out of sight, but you're not facing him alone." Davy shook his head. "It's too dangerous. Mark's desperate now, and desperate men do desperate things." "Exactly why you shouldn't go alone," Clara argued. "At least call Sheriff Wilson." "No time," Davy said, checking his watch. "I have 30 minutes to get there." His eyes softened as they met hers. "I have to do this, Clara, for Thunder, for Alex." Clara saw the determination in his face and knew arguing would be useless, but she also knew she couldn't let him walk into danger alone. "All right," she said, feigning acceptance. "Be careful." Davy pulled her into a quick, fierce embrace. "I will. Lock the doors after I leave, and don't open them for anyone but me." After he left, Clara waited only a few minutes before grabbing her own jacket and the keys to Tom's old truck, which he kept parked behind the equipment shed. She knew the Peterson property. It was the neighboring ranch that Mark's family had lost years ago, now standing abandoned and dilapidated just beyond Serene Stone Ranch's eastern boundary. She would stay out of sight just as she'd promised, but she would be there if Davy needed her, because that's what it meant to love someone, not just sharing the joy but standing beside them in danger, in fear, in whatever came. The Peterson ranch house loomed dark and forbidding in the moonlight. As Clara parked Tom's truck a good distance away, hidden behind a stand of trees, she could see Davy's vehicle already there, alongside Mark's black pickup. Through the dirty windows of the old house, flickering light suggested someone had lit lanterns inside. Moving as quietly as possible, Clara approached the house, staying low and in the shadows. A horse's nervous whinny from the dilapidated barn nearby told her where Thunder was being kept. She hesitated, torn between checking on the horse and finding out what was happening inside the house. The sound of raised voices made the decision for her. Creeping to a window, she peered inside. Davy and Mark stood facing each other in what had once been the main living room, now stripped of furniture, except for a rickety table between them. Melanie sat on the windowsill at the far end of the room, watching the confrontation with cold interest. "Sign the papers," Mark was saying, pushing a document across the table toward Davy. "Sign and you can take your precious horse home." Even from a distance, Clara could see the tension in Davy's posture. "How do I know Thunder's all right?" Mark smiled thinly. "You don't. That's the beauty of leverage." "Let me see him first," Davy insisted. "After you sign." Clara's heart pounded as she watched Davy reach for the pen Mark offered. He was actually going to do it, sign away the land his family had owned for generations, all for a horse. But Clara understood. It wasn't just any horse, it was Thunder. It was Alex. She had to do something. Backing away from the window, Clara made her decision. First, she needed to make sure Thunder was safe. Then she could figure out how to help Davy. The old barn was in even worse shape than the house, its roof partially collapsed on one side. Clara slipped inside through a gap in the wall, the smell of dust and decay thick in the air. A lantern hung from a beam, casting long shadows across the empty space. Thunder was there, tied to a post in the corner, his dark coat gleaming in the dim light. When he saw Clara, he nickered softly, recognizing her. "Shh, boy," she whispered, moving toward him. "It's okay, we're going to get you out of here." "I wouldn't count on that." The voice from behind her made Clara freeze. She turned slowly to find Melanie standing in the doorway, an expression of cold amusement on her perfect features. "I thought you might show up," Melanie said, stepping into the barn. "The loyal girlfriend coming to the rescue." Clara stood her ground, positioning herself between Melanie and Thunder. "What do you want, Melanie? Why are you helping Mark do this?" Melanie laughed, the sound hollow in the empty barn. "Helping? Him? I'm the one who came up with the plan. Mark may be the business brain, but I'm the one who understands what really hurts a man like Davy Reynolds." "And what's that?" Clara asked, trying to keep her talking while her mind raced for a way out. "Taking what he loves," Melanie said simply. "First the land, then the horse." Her eyes narrowed. "Then you." The threat was clear. Clara felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to show fear. "Why? What did Davy ever do to you?" Something flickered in Melanie's perfect mask, a glimpse of real pain beneath the cold exterior. "He lived," she said quietly. "Alex died and Davy lived, and then he had the audacity to move on, to find happiness again." Her voice hardened. "With you, of all people. A nobody. A stable cleaner." Clara understood then. It wasn't about money, or land, or even revenge. It was about grief twisted into something dark and destructive. Melanie hadn't just lost Alex. She had lost her future, her identity as his fiancée, her place in the world she thought she would have. "I'm sorry about Alex," Clara said sincerely. "But hurting Davy won't bring him back. Hurting Thunder won't. Make your pain go away." "Maybe not," Melanie admitted with a shrug, "but it feels good to try." Before Clara could respond, a shout from the house caught their attention. Davy's voice, angry and panicked. Then the sound of something breaking. Melanie smiled. Sounds like the negotiations aren't going well. Clara's concern for Davy overwhelmed her caution. She turned to rush toward the house, but Melanie was quicker, stepping between her and the door. "Not so fast," Melanie said, pulling something from her jacket pocket, a small revolver, its metal catching the lantern light. "We're not done here." Clara froze, her heart hammering. "Melanie, don't do this. Whatever you think this will accomplish, it won't bring you peace." "Peace?" Melanie laughed bitterly. "I don't want peace, I want justice. And since I can't have that, I'll settle for watching Davy Reynolds lose everything he cares about. Just like I did." Another crash from the house, followed by the sound of a struggle. Clara's fear for Davy gave her courage she didn't know she possessed. "Then you'll have to shoot me," she said calmly, taking a step forward. "Because I'm not letting you hurt Thunder, and I'm not letting you keep me from helping Davy." Melanie's hand trembled slightly. "Don't think I won't do it." "I think," Clara said, taking another step, "that you're in pain, that you loved Alex, and losing him broke something in you. I understand that better than you know." Another step. "But this isn't the way, Melanie. This won't heal anything." Tears glittered in Melanie's eyes now, the gun still pointed at Clara, but wavering. "You don't understand. You couldn't possibly understand what I lost." "I do," Clara said gently. "I know what it's like to build your whole identity around someone else, only to have them taken away. To feel like nothing without them." The words seemed to strike a chord in Melanie. The gun lowered slightly. "He was everything," she whispered. "My future. My life." Clara nodded, taking another careful step. "I know, and nothing can replace him. But this," she gestured around the barn at the gun, "this won't bring him back. It will only create more loss, more pain." For a moment, Clara thought she was getting through. Melanie's face softened, the gun lowering further. But then a final violent crash came from the house, followed by silence. Melanie's expression hardened again, her grip on the gun tightening. "Too late," she said coldly. "Sounds like Mark has taken care of your boyfriend." Fear for Davy surged through Clara. Without thinking, she lunged forward, grabbing for the gun. Melanie, surprised by the sudden movement, fired reflexively. The shot went wild, hitting one of the barn's support beams. The old wood splintered, and somewhere above them, something cracked ominously. Thunder reared in panic, pulling at his rope. Clara struggled with Melanie for the gun, both of them falling to the ground. The gun skittered away across the dirt floor. "Stop!" a voice commanded from the doorway. Both women looked up to find Davy standing there, a cut above his eye but otherwise unharmed. Behind him, Sheriff Wilson held a handcuffed Mark Peterson by the arm. "Davy!" Clara cried, relief flooding through her. "You're okay." "No thanks to your friend here," the sheriff said, giving Mark a small shove. "Caught him trying to burn the Reynolds property deed in the fireplace after Mr. Reynolds here refused to sign his fraudulent papers." Another crack sounded. From above, louder this time. All eyes turned upward as dust and debris began to rain down from the damaged support beam. "The barn's collapsing," Davy shouted. "Everyone out now." Clara scrambled to her feet, rushing to untie Thunder. The big horse was panicked, eyes rolling, hooves striking the ground nervously. "Clara, leave him," Davy called. "The whole roof is coming down." "I can't," she cried, fingers working desperately at the tight knots. "He'll die." Davy hesitated only a second before rushing to her side, pushing her hands gently aside. "Go," he said firmly. "I'll get him." "But trust me," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "Please." Something in his gaze, a certainty, a strength she hadn't seen before, made Clara nod. She backed away as Davy turned to Thunder, speaking softly to the frightened horse. "Hey, big guy," he said, his voice calm despite the increasingly urgent. Sounds of the building giving way above them. "Remember me. We've got some unfinished business, you and I." To Clara's amazement, Thunder quieted under Davy's touch, his panic subsiding enough for Davy to work on the knots binding him. "That's it," Davy murmured. "We're going to be okay. All of us." A final, terrible crack filled the air as the main support beam gave way. Clara screamed Davy's name as the roof began to cave in. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Davy, finally freeing Thunder, swung himself onto the horse's bare back in a single fluid motion. Thunder, responding to some deep memory of trust, bolted for the door with Davy guiding him through the falling debris. They burst out of the barn just as the structure collapsed behind them, Thunder's powerful legs carrying them safely away from danger. Davy pulled the horse to a stop near where Clara stood, trembling with relief and disbelief. "You rode him," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You actually rode him." Davy slid from Thunder's back, his own face a mixture of wonder and joy despite the danger they'd just escaped. "He remembered," he said simply. "We both did." Clara threw herself into his arms, clinging to him as if afraid he might disappear. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered against his chest. Davy held her tightly, one hand still on Thunder's neck, keeping the horse calm. "Never," he promised. "Not you, not him, not ever again." Sheriff Wilson approached, still holding on to Mark, who looked defeated and angry. Melanie sat on the ground nearby, handcuffed as well, her perfect composure finally shattered. "You folks, okay?" the sheriff asked. Davy nodded, his arm around Clara's shoulders. "We're fine, better than fine." "Good," Sheriff Wilson said with a satisfied nod. "Because I've got a lot of questions for all of you. Horse theft, breaking and entering, attempted fraud," he looked pointedly at Melanie, "and assault with a deadly weapon. We'll tell you everything," Davy assured him. "But first, I need to get Thunder and Clara home." The sheriff nodded understanding. "Tomorrow morning, my office. Don't be late." As the sheriff led Mark and Melanie to his vehicle, Clara looked up at Davy. In the moonlight, with dust and debris still clinging to his clothes and hair, he had never looked more handsome to her, or more whole. "You rode Thunder," she said again, still amazed. "After all this time?" Davy smiled, looking at the horse that had been at the center of his grief and guilt for so long. "It was time," he said simply, "to stop being afraid, to stop punishing us both for what happened to Alex." He cupped Clara's face gently in his hands. "You taught me that. You showed me how to care again, how to trust, how to move forward without forgetting." Clara leaned into his touch. "We taught each other," she corrected softly. Davy's smile deepened. "I love you, Clara Martinez," he said, the words falling easily from his lips now. "I think I've loved you since I first saw you singing to yourself in that dusty stable." Clara's heart swelled with joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "More than I ever thought possible." As they kissed under the stars, Thunder nudging them gently with his nose, Clara knew they had both finally found what they had been searching for. Not just love, but healing. The chance to build something new from the broken pieces of their pasts. 1 year later, the morning sun cast a golden glow over Serene Stone Ranch as Clara stood on the porch of the main house, a cup of coffee warming her hands. The property had transformed in the past year. New fences, fresh paint on the buildings. The stables expanded to accommodate the growing equine therapy program that was already helping dozens of people find healing through work with horses. After Mark and Melanie's arrests, peace had returned to the ranch. Mark had been sentenced to 5 years for his crimes, while Melanie, showing genuine remorse, had received probation and mandatory counseling. Last Clara had heard, she was working with a grief support group in the city, finding healthier ways to process her loss. The sound of hoofbeats drew Clara's attention to the pasture, where Davy was riding Thunder, the big black horse now fully rehabilitated and serving as the proud flagship of their therapy program. Seeing them together still filled Clara with joy and wonder, two wounded souls who had found their way back to trust and purpose. As if sensing her thoughts, Davy looked up and spotted her on the porch. With a smile, he guided Thunder toward the house, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "Good morning, Mrs. Reynolds," he called up to her, his eyes filled with love. "Care to join us for a ride?" Clara smiled, her hand instinctively touching the simple gold band on her finger, a 6-month-old reminder of the day she had officially become part of the Reynolds legacy, though in truth, she had belonged from the moment she first stepped foot on this land. "I'd love to," she said, setting down her coffee and descending the steps. Davy extended his hand, pulling her up to sit behind him on Thunder's back. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his shoulder, as Thunder carried them across the ranch they now shared. "Happy?" Davy asked, covering her hands with one of his. Clara tightened her arms around him, breathing in the scent of hay and horses and the man she loved. "Completely," she answered truthfully. As they rode toward the rising sun, Clara marveled at the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived at Serene Stone Ranch, broken and afraid, looking for nothing more than silence and routine. Instead, she had found her voice, her courage, and a love that had healed them both. Some people cleaned floors and some people cleaned souls. But Davy had been right that first day. Clara did both. And in the process, she had found that her own soul, once so wounded and weary, had been cleansed as well, made whole by the love of a man who had seen her value when she couldn't see it herself. Thunder broke into a gentle canter, carrying them across the pasture where wildflowers bloomed, in vibrant patches of color. Clara held tight to Davy, grateful for every moment, every struggle that had led them here. In the distance, the stables gleamed white in the morning sun, no longer a place of grief and regret, but a sanctuary of healing and hope. Just like the hearts of the two people who had found each other there, among the dust and silence, and built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. "I love you," Clara whispered against Davy's back, the words carried away by the wind, but felt in his heart all the same. He turned slightly, his profile strong against the sky. "And I love you," he answered, "always." Thunder carried them onward, toward the future they would build together. One day, one heart, one healed. Soul at a time, the end.